What up, Josh Rubin from East West Healing and Performance. Today I'm going to switch it up. It's the new year. Well, it's coming up. I'm getting sick of sitting behind my desk. I'm getting sick of everyone just seeing the same piece of paper in the background, which is some of my reference charts and my notes. So I want to change it up and do something different. I'm not convinced. Sorry, there's a bug. I'm not convinced this is where I'm going to do it, but I want to try some different avenues to spark it up a little bit, give you more education, because you know my YouTubes are not about solutions. They're about educating you so you understand what's going on, so you can make the best decision for yourself that works for you, your health, and aligns with your definition of health, because that's what it's all about. Just because I say it doesn't mean it's right. Just because someone says it in a book doesn't mean it's right. You have to study the human body so you can figure out basically what works for you and aligns with your definition of health. So that's the most important thing. So today I want to talk about uric acid. That's what that says, which most people actually correlate with gout. Now the question is, we have a lot of healthy people that email us and work with us, quote unquote healthy, that have gout. They're not overweight. They're not eating at McDonald's all the time. They don't eat meat and potatoes all the time. So we have to look at this and say, just because you're skinny doesn't mean you're healthy. Because gout is just not a disease that happens with healthy people. You know, when you get a swollen toe, and you get pain in your toe, and it swells, you can hardly walk. I've seen it in people's fingers. I've seen it in people that are overweight, and I've seen it in people that are underweight. So I think we have to understand that being healthy doesn't mean, or I should say, just because you're skinny doesn't mean you're healthy. You can actually be underweight and inflamed, or overweight and inflamed. So think about that as we go through this process. Well, the first thing is we have to look at what uric acid is. And it's typically a great indicator on a blood lab, correlated with other things, to find out if we have gout, any type of renal dysfunction, and inflammation. The bottom line is it's the end product of purine and nucleic acid breakdown in the body. So we're eating a diet that's high in muscle meats, diet that's high in shellfish, a diet that's high in shrimp, legumes, organ meats, and things like that. Now, I'm not against them, but it comes down to how much we actually need them certain times per week, meaning like shellfish. We recommend people eating those 1 to 2 times a week. Let's say you're eating them every day. Too much of anything isn't a good thing, so we have to think about that. So it's the end product of purine, nucleic acid breakdown in the body. The end levels of that is actually the end product of protein utilization in the body. So when you think about that, if you're looking at your blood lab, you can actually look at blood urine nitrogen as well, or BUN. And there's other factors, because that's basically showing you if you have a diet that's deficient in protein, or it tells you other things. But if you're eating a diet of protein, are you breaking it down? And is the liver actually able to excrete, and the kidneys able to excrete the byproducts of this? So BUN can actually be correlated with uric acid levels to tell you how well you're breaking down proteins. As well, if you're not eating protein, it's telling you how well you're actually breaking down your own proteins and how catabolic you are, whether you're metabolic alkalosis or metabolic acidosis. Now, when it comes to uric acid, it's pretty interesting. It's actually synthesized or stimulated by what's called xanthine oxidase activation, and that actually activates uric acid production in the body. Now, typically when we're inflamed, like I say, uric acid is a great indicator of inflammation in the body. How inflamed are you? Now, I don't mean do you have tendonitis and stuff like that. I mean at the cell level. And I feel that's the difference between what we do and other people do. And I know it's opinionated, but we're looking at what's going on at the cell level. So if the cells are not utilizing oxygen, thyroid hormone, cholesterol, etc., sugar, or I should say sucrose, from the foods that we eat appropriately, your cells actually produce excess lactic acid, which is a huge burden to the liver and creates more inflammation. Your cells actually want to produce carbon dioxide, which is very stimulatory to the thyroid and metabolism, which can actually upregulate the immune system, upregulate the gut, the detox system indirectly without doing all these crazy things. So anytime you have decreased oxygen to the tissue, xanthine oxidase is actually activated. Now this is quite interesting because we've talked about this millions of times. If you're estrogen dominant, you're oversynthesizing progesterone, you're progesterone deficient, you can't detoxify estrogen, you're on the birth control pill, you're taking bioidenticals, estrogen bioidenticals, you have blood sugar handling issues and so forth. The bottom line is this: estrogen in a simple sense actually pulls oxygen and nutrients away from the cells, away from your tissues, and away from your organs. Now think about this. If we have decreased oxygen production to the tissues, now iron does the same thing in the body because iron typically synthesizes with estrogen. It does the same thing, and it lowers vitamin E levels in the tissues and causes lipolysis, which is the breakdown of tissues into free fatty acids. And I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. So if we're estrogen dominant or we have blood sugar handling issues, and you can be a male with this issue as well, you have decreased oxygen to the tissues, which actually activates xanthine oxidase pathways, which increases uric acid levels. So that's just to show you that you could basically be eating a diet that's void of all these purine-rich foods and still get gout because of blood sugar dysregulation, increased estrogen levels over time, decrease oxygen to the tissues, which actually activates xanthine oxidase pathways. Now, it's interesting because iron and estrogen actually activate these pathways to increase uric acid levels, but progesterone, now I'm not saying supplementing with it, I'm saying if we eat the right foods, in the right frequencies for our body, and we regulate blood sugar based off body temperature and pulse, and use the right modalities that are needed, and very little supplements, we can actually upregulate metabolism and downregulate inflammation, which upregulates progesterone, which is actually antagonistic to estrogen. So it's antagonistic to xanthine oxidase, which will lower uric acid levels. Pretty interesting, huh? So the bottom line is this. It's a great indicator for inflammation. Now, most people like to say, oh, high uric acid, you have gout. The bottom line is this. You have to say, it's a great indicator for inflammation. We have to figure out with the person in front of us, is it the foods they're eating? Is it blood sugar handling issues? Do they have an inability to detox estrogen? Are they going through menopause? Do they have a hormone imbalance? Are they not utilizing the right foods and getting enough of the right fruits, which is sucrose? Fruits are sucrose. Fruits are sucrose. Fruits are sucrose. So if we're not getting the right types of carbohydrates in the diet, sucrose, then we can't regulate blood sugar. We can actually activate the xanthine oxidase pathway. I find that pretty interesting. Let me look at my notes here. So the bottom line is this. Anytime we're inflamed, the body wants to lay down tissue. It wants to lay down, your cells take up calcium, and your body wants to lay down, calcification of the bone, you get fibrosis of the arteries, and so forth. So that can actually activate the xanthine oxidase pathway as well, which upregulates uric acid. So anytime we're inflamed and our cells take up calcium, estrogen actually causes alkalosis of the cells. It causes them to hold on to water. It causes tissue and edema in our tissues here in itself. That can actually activate the xanthine oxidase pathway. Another thing that you can think about is you can actually correlate alkaline phosphatase levels and increase uric acid levels on your blood lab, because those together are actually somewhat of a sign of leaky gut syndrome. And I've talked about this before. People that have malabsorption, you got to look higher up. That's typically in the small intestine. Typically where the issue is, it's coming from higher up, maybe the stomach, mouth, who knows. It could be a pH issue, inflammation, decreased hypocaloric, it could be decreased HCl, B12 deficiency, could be the foods you're eating, decreased metabolism, and so forth. It could be a million and one things. But if you have malabsorption, it's interesting because when you have dysbiosis in the stomach and leading into the small intestine or the entire GI system, the body is more apt to actually hydrogenate polyunsaturated fatty acids into trans fatty acids. And this can actually upregulate the xanthine oxidase pathway, actually lead to increased uric acid levels because it's a sign of inflammation. So gut issues themselves can cause increased uric acid levels, but the question is, where's the gut issue coming from? Now, other factors that can actually increase uric acid levels, and you have to think about this when you get diagnosed, is if you're on diuretics. Aspirin can actually increase uric acid levels. Now, we know that, in a sense, aspirin can actually be inflammatory, increase cellular respiration, and so forth. It brings oxygen to the tissues. But for some people, if you are in high doses and you do a lab, you might show up with high uric acid levels. Heavy metal burden can actually increase uric acid levels. Caffeine can do this. The theobromine in teas. Hypothyroid can actually increase xanthine oxidase levels because of being estrogen dominance. That actually inhibits thyroid conversion in the liver, overburdens it, which leads to hypothyroidism, which leads to increased uric acid levels. Any type of biliary dysfunction in the liver, whether it's biliary insufficiency, biliary stasis, where a lot of the times that happens because of endotoxin coming from the gut, blood sugar dysregulation, and estrogen dominance. Fasting of any sort. Now, when I say fasting, that means if your body needs 2,000 calories and you're only eating 1,200, that essentially is fasting. That puts you in a catabolic state, and that can lead to increased uric acid levels. Other issues are, of course, diabetes and metabolic acidosis. Now, let's look at this. Another interesting fact, like I talked about with xanthine oxidase, is iron. Now, we get a lot of iron when we grow. We store it as ferritin. We actually can't get rid of it. Unless you bleed, you can't get rid of it. Now, if you're cooking with high pans with iron, you're taking iron pills, this is quite dangerous because iron is a heavy metal. It's quite toxic. It synthesizes with estrogen, and it feeds pathogenic bacteria in the large intestine. That's why it's important to have high levels of, or normal levels of bifidobacteria in the large intestine, because that actually absorbs the iron to take it away from these pathogenic bacteria. So the problem with iron is it actually causes the oxidation of unsaturated fats. It decreases vitamin E levels in the blood, and it actually causes lipolysis of our tissues, which is a breakdown of our tissues and the release of free fatty acids, which in a sense is inflammation. Now, I don't give solutions, but if you listen to this entire YouTube and take notes, there's a lot of solutions behind what I'm saying. But I want to give you some basic recommendations. Now, of course, everything's individualized. It's been shown that vitamin C from the foods that we eat can actually reduce iron in the body. Coffee sipped correctly and used in the right way after we eat in small amounts can actually absorb iron in the GI system, actually hence lowering iron levels. Of course, I'm not recommending everyone do this, but it's been shown that when you give blood, you can actually lower your ferritin levels by 20 to 30 points. For some people, high iron and getting or donating blood maybe once or twice will actually decrease iron in the body because it's inflammatory. We can't get rid of it. Women, when they bleed every month, they'll actually get rid of iron, but not enough to lower ferritin levels in the body. Now, the interesting thing is, now when I say vitamin E, I'm recommending you get it from your foods. There's so many foods with vitamin E in it. I'm not saying take a vitamin E supplement. But if we look at vitamin E, now when iron is in excess, it stimulates estrogen. It pulls vitamin E, same thing with unsaturated fats, it pulls vitamin E out of the blood and it decreases vitamin E. Now the interesting thing about vitamin E is a huge antioxidant in the body, just like cholesterol is. It protects and improves mitochondrial respiration, which is how your cells breathe, which can downregulate inflammation, downregulate diabetes, downregulate hypothyroidism, downregulate insulin resistance, and lead to a life free of inflammation and lower uric acid levels. Another interesting thing about vitamin E is it brings oxygen to your tissues. And that's what you're trying to downregulate, so you can downregulate xanthine oxidase, downregulate uric acid, downregulate inflammation, and upregulate wellness. Another interesting point about vitamin E, it opposes estrogen, and I talked about how that activates xanthine oxidase. It lowers intracellular calcium, and I talked about that. When our cells are inflamed, they hold on to calcium, so it can actually reduce inflammation at the cell level. And it's involved in the saturation of unsaturated fats, which is very important. So vitamin E can actually help reduce inflammation by assisting in the process of saturating a small amount of unsaturated fats. And another interesting point before I end is that a deficiency in vitamin E from the foods we eat, from iron, from estrogen, from unsaturated fats, can actually basically allow for the conversion of linoleic acid into unsaturated fats, which leads to more inflammation, more hypothyroidism, increased uric acid levels, and so forth. So hopefully you enjoyed this YouTube clip. I'm really excited for the new year. I'm really excited. I'm going to do a lot of new changes to my YouTube clips. So thanks for tuning in. I'm out of here. Peace.